The ink on my wife's death certificate wasn't even dry when my own daughter handed me an eviction notice. I stood on the porch of the home I'd built, clutching Evelyn's urn, while my son-in-law checked his watch and told me to be gone by noon. They thought I was just a feeble old man they could bulldoze for a quick payout, and for a moment I believed them. They thought they had won, but they didn't know about the 47 video files my wife recorded from beyond the grave, evidence that would turn their victory party into a crime scene. Here is how the silence of my life was shattered. I woke up reaching for her. It was a muscle memory, automatic and uncontrollable. My hand slid across the cold sheet, finding only the rough texture of cotton, where warm skin used to be, empty. It had been 3 months since the heart attack took Evelyn. 3 months is 90 days, 2,160 hours. I counted time differently now. As a perfusionist, I had spent 40 years managing heart-lung machines during surgery. I was the man who kept the blood flowing when the heart was stopped. I understood pumps, pressure, and the delicate balance of life, but I couldn't restart this. The silence in the house wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, like the air in an operating room after the flatline tone sounds. I lay there, listening to the house settle. The wooden beams groaned under the weight of the morning. It was a stagnant silence. The flow had stopped. I sat up, rubbing the grit from my eyes. The clock on the nightstand read 9 a.m. I dragged myself out of bed, my joints popping. I was 68, but today I felt 100. I walked down the hall, passing the photos on the wall. Us in 1992, standing in front of this house, the sold sign in the grass. We looked so young, so permanent. Then the doorbell rang. It wasn't a friendly ring. It was sharp, impatient. Ding, ding, ding. 3 rapid strikes. I tightened the belt of my robe. I wasn't expecting anyone. I checked the peephole, but the morning sun created a glare. I unlocked the heavy oak door and pulled it open. My breath caught in my throat. My daughter, Sarah, stood on the porch. She looked thin, her skin the color of old paper. She was biting her thumbnail, a nervous habit she'd had since she was 5, usually reserved for thunderstorms or math tests. She refused to meet my eyes, staring intensely at the welcome mat. Behind her stood the Brooks family. They were arranged like a blockade. James, her husband, stood with his arms crossed. His mother, Linda, wore a tight, forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. And then there was Richard. Richard Brooks, James's father, stepped forward. He wore a navy suit that looked tailored and expensive, a stark contrast to my worn flannel robe. He didn't smile. His eyes scanned me, cold and calculating, like an appraiser looking at a damaged piece of furniture. "Arthur," he said. His voice was flat. No warmth. "No good morning, Sarah?" I asked, ignoring him. I looked at my daughter. "Honey, is everything okay?" She stared at the floorboards. "Dad," she whispered. Her voice cracked, dry and brittle. "We need to talk." They didn't wait for an invitation. Richard pushed past me, his shoulder brushing mine with deliberate force. He walked into the living room like he owned the place, his shoes loud on the hardwood. The others followed. Linda, smelling of expensive perfume that masked the scent of Evelyn's lavender potpourri. James, keeping a hand on Sarah's back, guiding her, or was it pushing her? Richard stopped at the fireplace. He ran a finger along the mantel, collecting a smudge of dust. He stopped right next to Evelyn's urn. He didn't look at it. He didn't show an ounce of respect for the woman who had welcomed him to Christmas dinner for a decade. He just rubbed the dust between his thumb and forefinger with a look of distaste. I felt a spike of anger, hot and sudden. It was the first real thing I'd felt in months. "What is this?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. "Why are you all here?" Richard turned, checking his gold Rolex. He stood in the center of the Persian rug Evelyn had spent months picking out. "Let's keep this simple, Arthur. We have a schedule." He gestured around the room. "This house belongs to my family now." The room seemed to tilt. My perfusionist brain tried to calculate the drop in pressure. "Excuse me, the house is mine now, Dad." It wasn't Richard who spoke. It was Sarah. She finally looked up. Her eyes were swimming with tears, red-rimmed and terrified. "Mom left it to me," she choked out. "In the will. I'm sorry." James stepped up behind her. He put a hand on her shoulder. He squeezed. I saw her wince. It wasn't a comfort. It was a grip. A control mechanism. "That's not possible." I stammered, looking from Sarah to the urn on the mantel. We bought this house together. It goes to the spouse. That's how it works. Richard pulled a folded paper from his inner jacket pocket. He thrust it at me, signed and notarized. Evelyn's signature. I took the paper. My hands shook so hard the text blurred. I forced myself to focus. Last will and testament. I skipped to the bottom. The signature looked like hers, the loop of the E, the sharp slant of the S. But the date, April 1st. She was sick then, I said, my voice barely a whisper. She was weak. She was on heavy medication. She was lucid enough to sign. Richard said, a cold, dry laugh escaping him. Go ahead. Call a lawyer. Call whoever you want. He checked his watch again. But legal battles take months. Possession is immediate. You have until 1:00 p.m. to vacate the premises. Vacate? The word felt foreign in my mouth. Leave, Arthur, Richard said. You're being evicted. The locks get changed at 1. 4 hours, James added. His tone was apologetic, but his eyes were hard. Tick-tock. I looked at Sarah. I pleaded with my eyes. Sarah, this is your mother's home. You grew up here. Your height is marked on the doorframe in the kitchen. She opened her mouth to speak. A flicker of the daughter I knew appeared. But James leaned down. He whispered Sickman in her ear. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the effect. She went pale. The light in her eyes died, replaced by a dull resignation. She shut her mouth. It's done, Dad, she whispered. Please, just go. I spent the next 2 hours in a fog. It felt like I was decommissioning a machine I had spent a lifetime building. I threw clothes into a suitcase without looking at them. A blue sweater Evelyn bought me. My gray slacks. I grabbed my medication, beta blockers and statins. My own heart was a pump that needed maintenance, and right now, the pressure was dangerously high. I paused at the bedside table. The framed photo from 1992 sat there. The day we bought the house. Evelyn's hair was blowing across her face, and I was laughing, holding the keys up like a trophy. I took the photo. The glass was cool against my palm. Then I went to the mantel. I picked up Evelyn's urn. It was heavier than it looked. Brass and ceramic, holding everything that remained of 50 years of history. I'm sorry, Evie, I whispered. My voice sounded small in the empty room. I couldn't hold the line. At 12:45 p.m., I stood on the porch. 2 suitcases and my wife's ashes. I pulled the front door closed. It clicked shut. A final, mechanical sound, like a flat line. Jesus! Arthur! I looked up. Bill Johnson, my neighbor for 20 years, stood on his lawn. Bill was a retired structural engineer, a man who understood load-bearing walls and breaking points. He was chewing on an unlit cigar, a habit he couldn't kick. He took the cigar out of his mouth, staring at the suitcases, then at the Brooks silver Mercedes parked aggressively in my driveway. What happened? Bill asked. The wind ruffled his thinning gray hair. I couldn't speak. The words were stuck in my throat, blocked like a clot. I just pointed at the bags. Then I pointed at the house that wasn't mine anymore. Bill didn't ask again. He didn't offer platitudes. He walked over, his gait stiff but steady, and grabbed the heaviest bag. Come on, he said, his voice gravelly. You're staying with us. He didn't take no for an answer. He just started walking toward his house, expecting me to follow. That night in Bill's guest room, the silence was different. It was the silence of a stranger's house. I sat on the edge of the bed, reading the copy of the will Richard had given me. Sarah Miller Brooks, sole beneficiary, house, savings, car, everything. It looked legal. The syntax was correct. The formatting was standard. But my mind, trained to spot irregularities in heart rhythms, kept snagging on something, a data point that didn't fit the curve. The down payment. I closed my eyes, forcing my memory back. We had struggled for money back then. But Evelyn had received an inheritance from her aunt. She had been so proud. She wanted to pay the down payment herself. She handled the paperwork. She used her inheritance. I sat up in the dark. If she used her inheritance money, she might have titled the deed differently to protect the asset. It was a common safeguard back then. I needed to see the deed. The original deed. It was in her filing cabinet, in the home office, inside the house I had just been kicked out of. I went to the kitchen. The digital clock on the microwave read 11:15 p.m. Bill was sitting at the island, nursing a glass of whiskey. The only light came from the street lamp outside. "I need to get back in," I said. Bill looked at me. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "They changed the locks yet?" "Front door, probably," I said. "But the back door, the deadbolt is stiff. You have to lift the handle while you turn the key. If you don't know the trick, you think it's jammed." "Richard is lazy. He wouldn't have replaced a lock he couldn't open." Bill chewed on his cigar. He looked at me for a long moment, assessing the risk. "They'll call the cops, Arthur. That's trespassing." "They're at dinner," I said. "Cherry Creek? I saw Linda post a photo on Facebook 10 minutes ago. Appetizers just hit the table. We have an hour, maybe 90 minutes. Bill stood up. He finished his whiskey in one swallow and grabbed his car keys. "Let's go." We parked down the street, under the cover of a large oak tree. The street was quiet. The house was dark. It looked massive and imposing in the shadows. It looked like a stranger's home now. We walked up the side path. I saw Evelyn's herb garden. The rosemary bush was crushed, tire tracks running right through the soil. Richard had driven over it to park the Mercedes. My stomach twisted. It wasn't just carelessness, it was erasure. I crept to the back door. My hand trembled as I slid my old key into the lock. It went in. I held my breath. I lifted the handle, applying just the right amount of upward pressure, and turned. Click. The bolt slid back. I pushed the door open and stepped into the kitchen. The air inside was cold. The thermostat had been turned down low. But worse than the cold was the smell. The scent of lavender and baking bread was fading, replaced by the sharp chemical smell of cleaning fluid. They were scrubbing us out. "Fast," Bill whispered from the doorway. He stayed as lookout. I moved through the dark kitchen, navigating by memory. I knew every squeaky floorboard. I avoided the third plank in the hallway, and moved silently toward the office. I slipped into the office and shut the door. I clicked on my small penlight. Holding it in my mouth, I ripped open the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet. It groaned. A metal-on-metal screech that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet house. I froze. Silence. I exhaled and thumbed through the tabs. Taxes. Insurance. Medical. House 1992. I pulled the manila folder out. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Tachycardia probably 20 beats per minute. I opened the folder on the desk. There it was. The original deed. I shined the light on the owner line. Owner, Evelyn Stone, not Miller. Her maiden name. And below that, sole owner. She had bought the house in her name. It was her separate property, which meant she could leave it to anyone she wanted. But if the house was solely hers, Richard's claim that we bought it together, or that it was community property, was false. And if the new Miller was fake, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Text from Bill Carr in driveway. Go. Panic surged. My blood pressure spiked. I shoved the deed into my jacket pocket. I ran to the office door and cracked it open. Headlights swept across the kitchen window, illuminating the dust motes in the air. I heard the front door unlock, the heavy thud of the bolt retracting. I couldn't go out the back. They would see me from the kitchen. I ducked behind the kitchen island, curling myself into a ball. I was 68 years old, hiding in my own kitchen like a bigler. The front door opened. Voices drifted in. Finally, Richard's voice boomed. He sounded drunk. "God, it smells like old people in here. We need to gut this place. Rip out these carpets." "I'll call the contractors Monday," James said. "Do it tomorrow," Richard snapped. "I want this smell gone." I clenched my teeth so hard my jaw ached. Old people. He spoke of us like we were rot, like we were a fungus to be scraped away. They moved toward the living room. I saw my chance. I crawled on my hands and knees toward the back door. My knee popped loudly. What was that? Linda's voice. Sharp. "How settling," Richard muttered. "Old piece of junk." I reached the back door. I slipped through the crack, closing it as gently as I could. I didn't wait to lock it. I sprinted across the lawn, my chest burning, the cold night air stinging my lungs. I reached Bill's car, threw the door open, and dove inside. Go, I wheezed. Bill didn't hesitate. He gunned the engine, and we disappeared into the night. Back at Bill's house, I sat at the kitchen island, staring at the deed under the harsh light of the pendant lamp. My hands were still trembling, a subtle tremor I hadn't had since my first solo bypass surgery in 1984. Evelyn Stone, sole owner. The paper was yellowed at the edges. It smelled like old vanilla and dust, the smell of the past. If the house was in her name alone, Richard's claim that it was family property was a lie, a clot in the system. But that didn't explain the will he showed me. If Evelyn signed a new will in April, she could have legally given the house to anyone. Even Sarah. Was Richard telling the truth about the signature? Or was it a forgery? My mind raced. In the OKR, when a line is blocked, you have to find a bypass. You have to reroute the flow before the tissue dies. I was looking for a bypass, but all I saw were walls. My phone rang at midnight. The screen lit up the dark kitchen. Michael, my son. He lived 3 hours away in Fort Collins. He was a structural engineer, like Bill, solid, dependable, built to bear weight. Dad? His voice was tight. High tension. I'm here, Mike, I said. I'm at Bill's. I talked to Sarah, Michael said. I could hear wind in the background. He was outside. She was crying, Dad. She was hysterical. He said, you left. She said she had no choice. I was evicted, Michael. Richard has a will. He says Mom left everything to Sarah. That's garbage, Michael spat. Mom wouldn't do that. She knew Richard was a shark. She wouldn't throw you to him. I rubbed my temples. They have a document. Notarized. April 1st. There was a long silence on the line. Then Michael spoke, his voice dropping an octave. Dad, he said slowly, did Mom ever mention a storage unit to you? I frowned. No. We have an attic. Why would we need a storage unit? Last time I visited, Michael said, about 2 weeks before the heart attack. Mom pulled me aside in the garage. She gave me a key, a small silver one. She made me promise. Promise not to tell you. My heart hammered against my ribs again. Why? She said it was for safekeeping. Michael said. She said if anything happened to her, I needed to take you there. She made it sound like insurance. Safekeeping from what? She didn't say. But she looked scared, Dad. I've never seen Mom scared. She was the strongest person I knew. A chill went down my spine, colder than the night air. Evelyn scared? Evelyn was the woman who chased a bear off our porch with a broom. I'm coming home, Michael said. I'm leaving now. We're going to that unit. I lay in the guest room, listening to Bill snore, thinking about secrets. 40 years of marriage. I thought I knew every beat of her heart. I thought I knew every worry that kept her awake. Had I missed the sun? Was I so focused on keeping other people's hearts beating that I missed the murmur in my own home? Michael arrived at 6:00 a.m. He looked exhausted, his eyes red, but his jaw was set. He looked just like her, the same dark hair, the same determination that could move mountains. He hugged me hard. It wasn't a gentle hug, it was a desperate one. We're fixing this, he said. We drove to Lakewood. The storage facility was a sprawling complex of orange metal doors and concrete, surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. It felt desolate. A graveyard for things people couldn't let go of but didn't want to see. Unit 2047. It was down a long, echoing corridor. Michael's hand shook as he slid the small silver key into the padlock. It turned with a heavy thunk. He rolled the door up. It rattled violently, the sound echoing off the metal walls. Inside, the space was small, dry. Dust motes danced in the shaft of sunlight from the open door. There was almost nothing there. Just a single gray metal filing cabinet, and 2 cardboard boxes on top of it. One was labeled in Sharpie, legal documents. The other, Mom's craft supplies. Mom hated crafts, Michael whispered. She tried knitting once and threw the needles across her room. He walked over and opened the legal documents box first. He pulled out a thick manila envelope. Will and Trust, April 2024. He opened it. His eyes widened as he scanned the first page. He flipped to the second, then the third. Dad, look. He handed me the document. It was heavy, printed on bond paper, dated 6 weeks before she died. Irrevocable living trust. Beneficiary, Arthur Miller. Trustee, Robert Davis. This leaves the house to the trust, I said, reading the legal jargon. For my benefit. For my use. For life. An unirrevocable trust, Michael said. Dad, that overrides a will. Once the asset is in the trust, she doesn't own it anymore. The trust does. She can't will it to Sarah because it wasn't hers to give. If this is real, I said, Richard's will is useless. It's a piece of paper transferring nothing. Who is Robert Davis? Michael asked. Lawyer, downtown. Used to handle the hospital's liability cases. A shark. I flipped to the back of the trust. There was a letter clipped to it. Handwritten. My dearest Arthur. I sat down heavily on the concrete floor. I couldn't breathe. It was her handwriting. The loops, the pressure. I read, Arthur, if you are reading this, I am gone. I am so sorry I couldn't tell you. I didn't want to worry you until I was sure. Richard is dangerous. I found out about the loans. He is drowning in debt, Arthur. Millions. He has leveraged everything, James's house, his own firm. He sees our house not as a home, but as a lifeline. He has been pressuring Sarah. I've heard them arguing. He needs collateral. He thinks I'm just a confused old woman. He thinks he can bully me. I created this trust to protect you, to protect us. But I fear a piece of paper won't be enough for a man like him. She knew, I whispered. Tears blurred my vision, hot and stinging. She knew he was coming for us. She was fighting a war I didn't even know was happening. Dad, Michael said. His voice was urgent. He was looking at the second box. Mom's craft supplies. We need to open this. I used my car keys to slice the tape. Inside there was no yarn, no glue guns, no fabric. It was electronics. 4 small, black boxes, wireless cameras, high definition, battery operated, and a rugged external hard drive. There was a note taped to the hard drive. I hid cameras, living room, kitchen, office, password. Our foundation 1965. Watch the videos. Do what needs to be done. I looked at Michael. He looked at me. The air in the storage unit suddenly felt very thin. Evelyn hadn't just protected the assets. She had set a trap. She was monitoring them, Michael said. She must have suspected they were doing something physical. I picked up the hard drive. It was cold and sleek. It contained the last weeks of my wife's life. It contained the truth she couldn't speak. We have to watch them, I said. Now, we rushed back to Bill's house. The hard drive sitting on the dashboard like an unexploded bomb. The drive back was silent, but my mind was deafening. I was replaying every moment of the last 3 months. Every time Evelyn complained of nausea, every time she said her vision was blurry, I had dismissed it as the flu, or aging, or side effects of her standard meds. I was a perfusionist. I knew the rhythms of the heart better than I knew the back of my own hand, and I had missed the arrhythmia in my own life. At Bill's, Michael cleared the kitchen table. He set up his laptop, the fan whirring to life, as he plugged in the drive. A small blue light blinked on the casing. Read. 52 video files populated the screen. They were time-stamped. Start at the beginning, I said. My voice was steady, but my hands were gripping the edge of the table so hard my knuckles were white. April 10th, the screen flickered. A high-angle shot of our living room. The quality was grainy but clear enough. The date and time ticked by in the corner. Richard was there. I wasn't home. I was at the pharmacy. Evelyn was in the garden. I could see her sun hat through the window. Richard was walking the perimeter of the room. He wasn't looking at the family photos. He was looking at the structure. He tapped the walls. He checked the window latches. He was on his phone. Yeah, the old man is out. Richard's voice came through the laptop speakers. Tinny but distinct. The house is a gold mine. Pumps in the area are hitting 1.5 million. It's a teardown. Really? But the land is the bailout. He paused, listening. Then he laughed. Don't worry about the wife. She's frail. She won't be a problem much longer. Nature is taking its course, and if it doesn't, we'll give it a nudge. Michael slammed his fist on the table, rattling the laptop. He planned it. He was casing the house while Mom was watering the roses. I felt a wave of nausea. Keep watching. We watched file after file. It was a catalog of violation. Richard searching the medicine cabinet in the bathroom, James cornering Sarah in the kitchen, his voice low and threatening, grabbing her wrist when she tried to walk away. Linda, Richard's wife, holding up one of Evelyn's crystal vases and laughing, saying it would fetch $100 at an estate sale. They were vultures circling a body that wasn't even cold yet. Then we found it. File name 2024-0515-2347.p. For tape, May 15th, 11:47 p.m. The night she died, my hand hovered over Michael's shoulder. Do we want to see this? He asked, his voice trembling. We have to, I said. We have to witness it. I clicked play. The living room was dim, lit only by the street lamp, outside. The timestamp ticked, 23/3/47/12. Richard, James, and Linda were sitting on our couch. They looked comfortable, relaxed. Evelyn was upstairs. I was asleep in the guest room because my snoring had been bad that week. Is she out? Richard asked, keeping his voice low. James switched the pills in the Daily Organizer. Linda whispered. She sounded excited, breathless. Digoxin, high dose. It mimics heart failure. My blood ran cold. Digoxin. Digitalis. Derived from the foxglove plant. It increases the force of the heart's contraction but slows the rate. In high doses it causes ventricular fibrillation. Chaos in the ventricles. The heart quivers. Instead of pumping, it stops. Doctors won't even check, Richard said, swirling a drink. She has a history of AFib. It'll look like a natural cardiac event. Clean. Are you sure Arthur won't notice? James asked. He looked nervous, bouncing his leg. Arthur is a mechanic, Richard scoffed. He runs machines. He doesn't diagnose. He'll be too busy grieving to look at the toxicology. The room spun. I gripped the desk to keep from falling. They poisoned her, I choked out. The words felt like jagged glass. They didn't just wait for her to die. They murdered her. On the screen, Richard raised his glass in a mock toast. Plan B, we get the deed, we sell the house, pay off the $5 million. We walk away clean. Michael paused the video. The image froze on Richard's smiling face. Silence, heavy, suffocating silence. The kind of silence that follows a death sentence. They killed Mom for money, Michael whispered. He stood up, pacing the small kitchen, running his hands through his hair. I'm going to kill him. I'm going to drive over there, and I'm going to kill him. No, I said. My voice was surprisingly calm. It was the calm of the operating room when the patient crashes. Focus, procedure, action, that's what he wants. He wants us reckless. My phone buzzed on the table. A single vibration. Unknown number. I picked it up. A text message. I saw you running last night, Arthur. Stay away from the house, or Sarah pays the price. She's very fragile right now. I showed the phone to Michael. He's threatening her, I said. He knows we have the deed. He's holding her hostage. Not for long, Michael said. We needed a team. We couldn't do this alone. We called Robert Davis, the name on the trust. He met us an hour later at a 24-hour diner on the edge of town. Robert was an older man, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, wearing a trench coat that had seen better days. He looked like a man who lived in the gray areas of the law. He watched the video on Michael's laptop, shielding the screen from the waitress. He watched it twice. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. This is capital murder, he said softly. Premeditated, conspiratorial. In the state of Colorado, this is life without parole, minimum. We need to go to the police, Michael said. Right now. We need more, Robert said, holding up a hand. The video is inadmissible without corroboration. Defense will claim it's a deepfake or altered, especially with AI these days. We need to prove the medical side. We need biological evidence. Did she see a doctor recently? Robert asked me. Vance, I said. Her cardiologist. She saw her a week before she died for a routine checkup. Did they draw blood? Yes, I said. Routine panel, electrolytes, kidney function. Robert's eyes narrowed. Hospitals keep samples. Sometimes for weeks. If we can get that sample tested for digitalis. Dr. Aris Thorne, Robert said, pulling out a flip phone. He's a forensic toxicologist. He owes me a favor. If there was poison in her system a week prior, if they were dosing her slowly, it will be there. And Sarah? I asked. Richard has her. If we move on the police now, he might hurt her, Robert said. He's desperate. A man in debt for $5 million with a murder charge hanging over him. He has nothing to lose. We need to get him out of the house, I said. We need to separate him from Sarah. How? Michael asked. I thought about the invite I had seen on the fridge in the video. A party, I said. The Brooks family house warming. This Saturday night. Richard is a narcissist. He wants to show off his trophy. Robert smiled. It was a shark's smile. We crash the party, he said. We expose him in front of his world, in front of witnesses, and when he cracks, we take him down. I finished. Robert made a call, and 30 minutes later, Dr. Aris Thorne walked into the diner. He was a small man with nervous energy, wearing a tweed jacket that smelled of formaldehyde and pipe tobacco. He sat down and immediately took off his thick glasses, pulling a microfiber cloth from his pocket. Squeak, squeak. The sound of him polishing the lenses was rhythmic, precise. Digital labs, Thorne said, not bothering with pleasantries. He had listened to the audio clip on Michael's laptop. It's a classic. Nasty. Efficient. Can you prove it? I asked. Without a body? Thorne put his glasses back on. His eyes were magnified and tense. Digitalis binds to the sodium-potassium ATPase pump and the heart cells. It lingers in the vitreous humor of the eye longer than in the blood. If we exhume her, that takes weeks, Robert interrupted. We need something faster. We need a link between the Brooks family and the poison, or the absence of her real medicine. Thorne mused. If they swapped the pills, they had to put the real ones somewhere. You don't flush prescription heart meds. They float. You don't throw them in your own trash. That's evident. They took a box, I said, a memory surfacing from the video logs. April 10th, Richard carried a box out of the house. We left Thorne with the hard drive to analyze the audio frequencies. He claimed he could identify the specific rattle of the pill bottle in the video, and met Michael's contact Maggie O'Neill in the parking lot of a closed bank branch. It was 3:00 a.m. The world was gray and cold. Maggie was a branch manager, who looked like she hadn't slept in a week. She sat in her sedan, the engine running, heat blasting. She handed Michael a thick folder through the window. I shouldn't be doing this, she whispered, looking at the security cameras on the building she worked for. This is a felony. Breach of privacy. Richard Brooks ruined your father, Michael reminded her gently. He drove his construction firm into the ground and bought the assets for pennies. Maggie nodded, her jaw tightening. He's broke, Michael, completely underwater. I opened the folder under the dome light of our car. Loan default warning. Foreclosure notice. Gambling debts. $1.2 million. Total liability $5.2 million. He's not just in debt, I said, tracing the red numbers. He's drowning. He leveraged James's house. He leveraged his own firm's payroll accounts. He needed a win, Michael said. He needed a $1.5 million asset, the house to secure a bridge loan, to keep the lights on for another month. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. Evelyn didn't die for passion. She didn't die for hate. She died to cover a gambling debt. She was just a line item on a balance sheet he needed to erase. We had the method, poison. We had the motive. We had the confession, video. But to make the arrest stick, and to leverage the police into a raid rather than a slow investigation, we needed to place Richard at the scene of the theft. We needed eyes on the ground. At 7:00 a.m., the sun was rising over my old street. It looked peaceful, Deceptive. I parked 2 blocks away and walked to Mrs. Higgins' house. Mrs. Higgins was 82. She spent her days worrying with dandelions and watching the street from her front porch. She was watering her petunias when I walked up. "Arthur?" She squinted, lowering the hose. "I thought you moved to Florida." That's what the young man said. "Which young man, Mrs. Higgins?" "The one in the fancy car." "The loud one?" "Richard," I said. "He told me you and Evelyn went to a retirement community," she said, frowning. "But I saw you leave yesterday with a suitcase." "Mrs. Higgins, think back to April. Did you see that man at my house when I wasn't there?" She tapped her chin. "Oh, yes, several times. Usually Tuesdays. You work on Tuesdays. Did you see him take anything?" "He carried out a box one time," she said confidentially. "A green metal box. Looked like a tackle box. I thought he was going fishing." My heart skipped a beat. Evelyn kept her spare medications in an old green fishing tackle box in the linen closet. It was her system. "Did you see where he put it?" "In the trunk of that silver car," she said. "He was in a rush, dropped a few papers. He didn't pick them up. We went to the police station at 9:00 a.m. Detective Williams was a woman of few words. She sat in a small interrogation room watching the video on the laptop. She read the toxicology report Thorne had drafted based on the symptoms. She looked at the bank statements. Her face turned to stone. "I want him," she said, standing up.
"I want a warrant. I want him in cuffs today."
"No," Robert Davis said, stepping in front of the door. "He has Sarah." Williams paused. "The daughter?" "She's in the house," I said. "He's mentally holding her hostage. Maybe physically. If you roll up with sirens, he might panic. He might hurt her, or he might claim the video as fake and destroy the evidence he still has. The green box. If we move now, we risk a standoff," Michael added. "We need to separate him from his support system. We need to catch him when he feels safe." "How?" Williams asked, crossing her arms. "The party," I said. I pulled the crumpled invitation from my pocket. It had been in the trash at Bill's house. James had sent one to Bill, rubbing it in. The Brooks family housewarming. Saturday night, 7:00 p.m. "He wants to show off his victory," I said. "He's invited the country club set, the investors. He thinks he's won." "We crash the party," Robert said. "We walk in with the deed. We play the video on the big screen. We strip him of his reputation, his leverage, and his control in one stroke." Detective Williams looked at the invitation, then at me. A slow, predatory smile spread across her face. "I can get a warrant by 5:00 p.m., she said. "I'll have a tactical team in the catering vans. I'll be inside as a server." "And us?" I asked. "You're the guests of honor," she said. "Make him sweat. Arthur, make him confess." We had the plan. We had the team. I spent the rest of the day sitting in Bill's garden, sharpening my focus. I wasn't a surgeon, but I knew that before you cut, you had to be calm. You had to lower your own heart rate so you could control the machine. Richard Brooks thought he was the predator. He thought I was just an old man with a broken heart. He didn't know that I had spent 40 years keeping blood flowing through stopped hearts. He didn't know that I knew exactly how to apply pressure. Saturday night arrived. The sky was a bruised purple. I put on my best suit, the charcoal one Evelyn loved. I tied my tie in the mirror. My hands were steady. "Ready, Dad?" Michael asked from the doorway. He looked fierce. I looked at my reflection. I didn't see a victim anymore. "Let's go take our house back," I said. The driveway was lined with luxury cars. Range Rovers, Teslas, the occasional Porsches. The house, my house, was blazing with light. Music drifted out into the cool night air. Jazz, smooth and indifferent. It sounded like a celebration. To me, it sounded like an infection. I adjusted my cuffs. "Remember," I told Michael, "don't engage until the signal. We are just observers, until we aren't." We walked up the driveway. The gravel crunched loudly under our shoes. At the door, a hired server in a black vest nodded to us, checking a clipboard. It was Detective Williams. She didn't smile. She just gave a micronod, a tilt of her chin toward the living room. "The trap is set." We stepped inside. The heat hit me first. The house was packed. 50 people, maybe more. The smell of expensive perfume scotch and hors d'oeuvres was overwhelming, but it was the sight that hurt. Linda had been busy. The heavy velvet curtains Evelyn loved were gone, replaced by sheer, modern panels. The antique clock was missing. The walls were stripped of our family photos. No graduation pictures, no candid shots of the grandkids. Just abstract art that looked like bruises on canvas. They hadn't just moved in. They had sterilized the place. Richard held court by the fireplace. He was holding a crystal tumbler of scotch, laughing at something a man in a gray suit said. He looked flushed, triumphant, the master of his domain. Then he saw me. His smile didn't vanish, but it froze. The corners of his eyes tightened. He excused himself and walked toward us, parting the crowd like a ship breaking ice. "Arthur," he boomed. His voice was too loud, performing for the audience. "And Michael, I didn't think you'd come. So glad you could make it to the transition." He extended a hand. His palm looked damp. I didn't take it. I looked at his hand, then at his face. "Where is she, Richard?" He dropped his hand, his smile thinning. "Sarah? She's around, enjoying herself." I scanned the room. I found her in the corner, near the bay window. She wasn't enjoying herself. She was shrinking. James stood next to her, his hand resting on the back of her neck. To the casual observer, it was affectionate. To me, it was a vice grip. Sarah saw me. Her eyes widened. She shook her head slightly. A terrified, vibrating motion. "Go away," she mouthed. "Please." Linda drifted over, sensing the tension. She wore a dress that cost more than my first car. "Arthur, please," she hissed, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Don't cause a scene. These are important people. This is a celebration." "Oh, we're celebrating," I said, my voice carrying just enough to turn heads nearby. The music dipped as the track changed. Robert Davis stepped out from behind Michael. He was wearing his rumpled trench coat, looking like a noir detective in a room full of peacocks. "Mr. Brooks?" Robert said. His voice was gravel and authority. Richard frowned. "Who the hell are you?" "I'm Robert Davis, trustee of the Evelyn Stone Trust, and legally speaking, you are trespassing." The conversation in the room died. The silence spread outward from us like a ripple until the only sound was the ice clinking in someone's glass. Richard laughed. It was a nervous, jagged sound. "The old man is confused. Sarah owns this house. She has the will." "Actually," Robert said, opening his briefcase with agonizing slowness. "She doesn't." He pulled out the trust document. He held it up, turning it so the light hit the notary's seal. April 1st. Evelyn Stone placed this property into an irrevocable living trust. The beneficiary is Arthur Miller. The house belongs to the trust. It was never Sarah's to inherit, and certainly not yours to steal. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I saw the banker Maggie had met. He was standing by the bar, looking suddenly very alert. Richard's face turned a mottled red. "That's a forgery." She was senile. She didn't know what she was signing. "It's notarized," Robert said calmly. "By Elena Russo. We have her sworn statement." Evelyn was lucid, sharp, and terrified of you. "Get out," Richard snarled. The mask was slipping. The veins in his neck bulged. "Get out before I call the police." "We already did," I said. I looked at Michael. Now, Michael was already at the smart TV above the fireplace. The massive screen Richard had installed over Evelyn's mantel. He plugged in the HDMI cable. "What are you doing?" James shouted, stepping away from Sarah. The screen went black. The jazz music cut out. Then the video started. Timestamp May 15th, 2347. The image was giant, looming over the silent party guests. Richard, James, and Linda sitting on the very couch where some of the guests were currently seated. The audio boomed through the surround sound speakers. "Is she out?" Richard's voice, crystal clear. James switched the pills. Linda's voice whispered, "Digilose, it mimics heart failure." A woman in the front row gasped. A glass shattered on the floor. Richard froze. He stared at himself on the screen, a ghost confessing his sins. "Doctors won't even check. She has a history. Clean. We sell the house. Pay off the $5 million. The room was paralyzed. It was the moment of total system failure. The guest backed away from Richard as if he were radioactive. "Turn it off!" Richard screamed. It was a primal, animal sound. "Turn it off!" He lunged for Michael. Detective Williams dropped her tray of champagne flutes. Crash. She drew her weapon in one fluid motion. "Police!" Nobody move. The back door burst open. Uniformed officers flooded in. The front door opened, 2 more. "Hands! Let me see your hands." Chaos. Guests scrambled toward the walls. James tried to bolt toward the kitchen, but Williams was faster. She tackled him into the buffet table. Guacamole and shrimp flew everywhere. "I didn't do it. He made me." James screamed, pinned to the floor. "He made me switch them." "Shut up, you idiot," Richard roared. He was looking for an exit, spinning in circles. He saw the police. He saw the guests staring at him with revulsion. He saw me. He pointed a shaking finger at the screen. "It's fake. It's AI. They generated it. It's a setup." Williams walked toward him, handcuffs out. "We have the toxicology report from Dr. Thorne, Richard. The blood sample from her checkup, positive for digital ice." "It's over." Richard's knees buckled. The fight drained out of him instantly. He didn't look like a titan of industry anymore. He looked like a small, broken man in an expensive suit. As they cuffed him, I walked over to Sarah. She was standing alone in the center of the room, staring at the TV screen where the video had paused. Her hands were over her mouth. "You knew," she whispered to the frozen image of her husband and father-in-law. She turned to look at James, who was being hauled up by 2 officers. "You killed her?" Her voice broke. "You told me it was natural. You held my hand at the funeral, and you killed her." James couldn't meet her eyes. He looked at the floor. "We needed the money, Sarah." "The debt," Sarah screamed. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated heartbreak. She slapped him, hard. The crack echoed through the room. "You monster!" She collapsed. I caught her before she hit the floor. I held her tight, shielding her from the flashing lights. "I've got you," I whispered into her hair. "I've got you, honey." They dragged Richard past us. He stopped. His eyes were cold, dead things. "She was supposed to be stupid." He spat at me. "She was a librarian. She knitted sweaters." I looked him in the eye. I felt nothing but pity for his smallness. "She was smarter than you, Richard," I said softly. "And she loved us more than you love money. That was your miscalculation." I watched the blue lights reflect off the wet driveway as they shoved him into the cruiser. The pump had stopped. The pressure was gone. The house was quiet again. The flashing lights had faded, leaving only the harsh, fluorescent reality of the kitchen lights. The police had taped off the living room crime scene. "Do not cross." My home was now evidence. I sat at the kitchen table, answering Detective Williams' questions mechanically. My voice felt detached, as if I were speaking through a long tube. "Did you know about the debts?" "No." "Did you suspect James?" "No." I looked at my hands. They were stained with ink from signing statement after statement. I felt a profound numbness. In surgery, after a long, difficult case, there is no immediate joy, only exhaustion. The adrenaline crashes, and you are left with the silence of the machine. Across the room, Sarah sat on the floor, wrapped in a shock blanket. She wouldn't let go of my hand. She was weeping, not loudly, but with the steady, heartbreaking rhythm of someone whose world has dissolved. "I'm so sorry, Dad," she sobbed over and over. "I didn't know. I swear." "I know," I said, smoothing her hair. "He trapped you. You were a victim, too. He threatened to frame James," she whispered, her voice trembling. "He said if I didn't sign the will, he said you'd be homeless. He said he'd take care of you if I gave him the house. He made me think I was saving you." "Shh," I said. "The infection is gone. Now we heal." It took weeks to reclaim the house. Michael and I spent days scrubbing. We threw out Linda's modern art. We ripped down the sheer curtains. We hired a team to clean the carpets. But eventually I just tore them up. I couldn't walk on the rug where Richard had stood and confessed to killing my wife. We found the hardwood underneath, scratched, imperfect, but real. Sarah moved back into her old room. It was a regression, but a necessary one. She needed to be a daughter again before she could be anything else. She filed for divorce 3 days after the arrest. She took back her name, Sarah Miller. The trial was swift. The video evidence was insurmountable. I sat in the front row every day. I needed to see it through. I watched Dr. Thorne explain the chemistry of digital ice, how it binds, how it kills. I watched Maggie testify about the deaths. But the hardest part was watching Sarah take the stand. She looked small in the witness box, but her voice was clear. She pointed a shaking finger at Richard. "He stole my mother," she said, tears streaming down her face, "and he tried to steal my soul to pay for his mistakes." The jury didn't hesitate. Guilty. First-degree murder. Conspiracy. Richard Brooks was sentenced to life without parole. James, for his cooperation and lesser role, received 20 years. Linda, who knew but did nothing, received 10 years for conspiracy and obstruction. When the gavel banged, I didn't feel triumph. I felt a release of pressure, the heavy weight on my chest. The one that had been there since the heart attack finally lifted. Evelyn could rest. The machine could be turned off. 2 years later, I stood in the garden. It was late August. Evelyn's sunflowers were blooming, towering over the fence, their heads turned toward the sun. I was 70 now. My knees ached when it rained, and my hands weren't as steady as they used to be. But my heart was beating strong. Sarah was kneeling in the dirt, weeding the lavender. She looked healthy. The gray pallor was gone, replaced by a sun-kissed glow. She was smiling at something Michael was saying. She had started a foundation with the money we recovered from Richard's remaining assets. The Evelyn Miller Initiative. It helped victims of financial abuse. She was turning her pain into a shield for others. "Hey, Dad," she called out, shielding her eyes from the sun. Michael brought lemonade. Michael walked out onto the porch. He was holding a pitcher. He was engaged now to a kind woman named Elena. Life was moving forward. The flow continued. I sat on the wooden bench I had built with Evelyn 40 years ago. I ran my hand along the rough grain. I closed my eyes. For a moment, just a fleeting second, I could smell her perfume, vanilla and rain. "We did it, Evie," I whispered to the wind. "The kids are safe. The house is safe." A breeze rustled the sunflower leaves. It felt like a caress, like an answer. I looked at my children, laughing, arguing about the best way to trim a rosebush. I realized something then. Richard had been wrong about everything. He thought the legacy was the house. He thought it was the equity, the land, the assets. He thought power was something you took, but he was wrong. The house wasn't the legacy. The money wasn't the legacy. The legacy was the love that fought back from the grave. It was Evelyn, terrified and dying, finding the strength to hide cameras and write a trust. It was the intelligence to protect her family when she couldn't physically be there. I took a sip of the lemonade. It was tart and sweet. I watched the sun dip below the Rockies, painting the sky in shades of gold and violet. Truth always finds a way, I thought, especially when a mother is protecting her own. If you've walked this long road with Arthur and Sarah, thank you for being a witness to their story. There are so many more truths hidden in the quiet corners of the world waiting to be heard. If this story resonated with you, I invite you to like and subscribe, not just to support the channel, but to ensure that these voices of justice and resilience continue to reach the light. Rest in peace, Edie.